Have you ever wondered what an immigration lawyer thinks of our immigration system, especially if they were personally affected by it? My guest this week is Shabnam Lotfi, an immigration lawyer who was born in Iran but migrated to the States at a very young age. In this episode, she shares her immigration journey, why she chose law, and the secrets to her firm's success despite her original skepticism. Additionally, she openly gives suggestions and advice to those of you who are suffering as a result of recent changes in our immigration system. So go ahead, grab your cup of tea, and join me in this episode of Empowering Conversations. Hello and welcome to the Empowering Conversations podcast, a place to get inspired, challenged, and empowered by stories of immigrants who build their success from zero. I'm your host, Mehran.
We first moved to Buffalo, New York, and then we moved to Philadelphia, but both suburbs were predominantly white with not a lot of diversity. Everybody wanted an American name at the time, and I think that they used to say America is a melting pot, but now we say it's a tossed salad because each culture holds on to pieces of their own heritage. As a kid growing up in the US, fitting in was a little bit hard. And maybe also I think as a kid, I had identity issues with my parents having a very Persian household and then going to school in a very American environment. I remember my mom or my dad said, you can't have nail polish on when you go to school because they're going to check your nails. And I would go to school every day and nobody ever checked my nails. But that's something that they had, that was their experience from what they experienced in Iran. It wasn't like that here. And sometimes I think we can all relate a little bit to my big fat Greek wedding, because here I'm going to school with Ormis Abzi and everybody has these Wonder Bread sandwiches and it's like, well, I don't know why. But I did feel like, why do all these kids have these birthday parties? They have cupcakes. My mom didn't know how to make cupcakes with like frosting on it. And so I felt as a child that I had to somewhat be a little bit of an interpreter, cultural interpreter. So I was a little bit more like, Mom, we got to make cupcakes. Mom, we got to have camp. I need sleepovers. It's TGI Friday. We need to have sleepovers. So they were hesitant about a lot of that stuff. It was, what do you mean you want to go sleep on somebody else's floor in somebody else's house? You have a bed. We bought a bed for you and you want to go sleep on somebody's floor? It was definitely painful, but I view every pain as a double-edged sword, and you learn a lot from tough experiences.
Our audience are mostly immigrants, right? And I can imagine some of them have kids that are already struggling with their culture and what they learned and all the fears that they brought in from their country. As someone that have gone through some of those pains, what is a suggestion that you could give these parents who are listening right now to make their kids' life a little easier, but at the same time honor some of those cultural values?
I mean, I think the hard part for parents is this fear of, I'm going to lose my identity. I think people come to the US and there's this whole experience of first rejecting American culture. People come here all the time and they say, Americans don't have culture. Look, what is this? Hot dogs and hamburgers? This isn't culture. Baseball, what is this? So there's a rejection, and I don't know where it stems from. Maybe it's a fear of a missing of the home, a missing of the life abroad. But I would say you can have both. You can celebrate Nowruz and you can celebrate Easter. You can celebrate Nowruz, you can celebrate Christmas. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I'm either going to be Iranian living in the United States, or I'm losing my identity entirely. American culture has a whole bunch of wonderful things that it offers, which is why it draws people here. It's why you came here. And I think we should all try to balance maintaining our home culture with what America offers. If a kid wants to go to a baseball game, what's wrong with that? They want to have a sleepover, there's nothing wrong with that. I would ask myself, like, what is it that's bothering me if I allow my child to do this? Before just turning it off and saying, absolutely not, this is not who we are. I think if for my child, we will definitely make sure that we know other children's parents, that their parents come over, that we interact with them, we invite them over for a barbecue, we get to know them better, so that we as parents can be comfortable to let our kids go to their house to stay over, have them come over. Your kids can still enjoy the things that people do in America if you can find out what it is that's troubling you and address that, instead of just a blanket, nope, we're not going to do this because that's not our culture.
Thank you for sharing that. So basically being more aware of the core of the problem. You also talked about the challenge of fitting in at that time in Buffalo, New York. Can you tell us what were some lessons you've learned from it that these parents who are listening right now can take away and say, this is what I can do to help my child, or this is how I can look at it?
So I think it took me 10, 20, maybe 30 years to figure out this whole identity issue. I used to feel frustrated because I felt that in the United States, everybody viewed me as an Iranian and that I'm an outsider. But then whenever I traveled anywhere in the world, including Iran, everybody would say, that's an American. So how am I an American everywhere else, and here I'm an outsider? I've learned to embrace the American in me, my American values. And I think nobody should live here 10, 20, 30, 40 years feeling like a foreigner. If you're an American citizen, whether it's for one day or a decade or 10 years or 20 years, whether you're a citizen through birth or through your grandparents, you own this country just as much as anybody else does. So don't think I've only been here a week, a month, a year, a decade. You own this place any less than anybody else does.
A few years back, I attended a talk at our local cultural center. A speaker said something that really resonated with me as an Iranian-American who migrated as an adult. She said, after a while, we're neither Iranian nor American. We sit at the hyphen, not belonging to either of those communities. That day, I realized I had a choice as to what part of the hyphen I want to sit at. How much of my country's culture I want to embrace. What I want to pass to my child. It is my choice, rather our choice as a family, my husband's and mine. We make that decision on a daily basis as our son is growing up. And it is your personal choice. Or if you're here as a family, it is your family's choice. Just remember, regardless of where you choose to sit at the hyphen, be mindful of its impact on your own growth and wellness, as well as your family's.
Why did you become an immigration lawyer?
I wanted to be a lawyer since I was a kid. Maybe it's since like 5 years old. And I think as a kid, I often wondered, why am I living this life? I'm an Iranian. I was born in Tehran. And then we moved to Germany, and now I'm in the US. Well, why am I living this life this way? You know, my parents talked about the war and that there wasn't anything left for us in Iran. And I blamed politics and I blamed bad government as a very young kid for my life experiences. And I just wanted to be a social activist maybe since 6 or 7 years old. Because war causes damage to millions of families. And bad government is what causes wars. And in order to get rid of bad government, we need good government, you need good lawyers. Whether the fact that I was able to pursue my childhood dream is part luck, part persistence, but I always wanted to be a lawyer. I always wanted to be in Congress. It's part life circumstances, and maybe it's just my personality. And then when I went to law school and I graduated, there really wasn't anybody that said they needed help with a divorce or they had a criminal issue. I wasn't interested in corporate politics, but I was an immigrant. Immigration law sounded interesting. I ended up marrying somebody who was an international student, and he ended up being my first case. So I had to keep my husband here. And I felt that I could understand the immigrants and I understood the American world and I could be a really good bridge. So I opened up shop. There were certainly 1,000 times, if not more, where I thought it was never going to happen, that I would never get into law school, that I would never get out of law school, that I'd never actually be a lawyer. So when I graduated in 2011, nobody was hiring. It was the worst time to be a lawyer. And it was either leave law entirely or figure it out on your own. So I told myself, I'll do this for 6 months. And if it doesn't work out, I'm going to go do something else with my life. But I felt like I had to give law a chance before I gave up on it. Yeah.
So did you make that decision right after 6 months, or did you extend that 6 months?
I thought it would be 6 months. Give it 6 months, see if this works out. And my brother said, 6 months is really not enough time to try something. You really need to give it longer than that. Go for a year. So I gave it a whole year and did well. And then friends told friends, and then friends of friends told friends. And then the next thing I knew, I had an immigration practice. But the one lesson I learned through that experience was that there were so many things that I had to offer as a human being that were not on my resume. Because if you look on your resume, all that people appear to matter or care about is that, were you in the top 10%? Did you go to a top school? What is your GPA? But I realized that being a lawyer, it's not about what school you went to, what degree you got, but do you care about people? Can you listen to them? Do you win their trust? Like, there's so many factors that so many skills that somebody has to offer that's not going to be on their resume. One of the reasons I wanted to leave law is I felt like, well, I'm not a top 10% student. I didn't go to Harvard. I had all these other credentials that I was measuring myself against versus all the things that really matter.
What do you think did really matter? I mean, you did allude to it that, care for people. What were other things that mattered in the path? Because I know there are some listeners who are immigrant and they care about becoming an immigration lawyer, but they might have some of those standards that you just put out there for us.
There are these norms that we think society have, and I don't know where they come from, but you think that people want an attorney that has a fancy desk with a fancy office and a fancy car. They must be successful. There's these things that are just happening around us. But in reality, I've never had a single client that cared what our letterhead looked like. What they care about is like, do you care about my case? Will you fight for me like you would fight for yourself? And those are the things that have always helped me in my career, is focusing on the things that matter and forgetting all the noise. It's all noise, whether you have an award on your wall or not. What really matters is, will you fight for my case? Do you know what you're doing? Are you competent? Those are the things that people cared about.
How does your knowledge and understanding of our immigration system impacted your view about immigration?
I understand the framework of our immigration system. So at its core, in my opinion, the way the system is designed, it's set up to encourage US economic growth. So we have tourist visas, so people can come here, spend their money in our restaurants, our hotels, go to tours, museums. We have student visas, so the universities have access to a larger pool of applicants, and they can charge higher fees for international students. We have e-visas that are investor visas. Come over here, start up a hotel, a restaurant, whatever, a business. The EB5, again, bring your money to the US and spend it here. So I think that's a huge component of it. The other side of it is keeping families together. So whether you come as a student, you could bring your husband, your wife, your children with you. If you come on an E visa, an L visa, they allow families to come with you. Or if you get a green card, your family can piggyback off of that. So we've got these two things with some other competing interests. We want people to come here, but we don't want them to take away from American jobs. So we have a labor system for that. A company has to sponsor you. We want people to come here, but we don't want anybody that's a security threat. So don't have a disease, don't have anything bad in your background. There's a good system in place. The problem is that it's slow. There's a backlog. It's impossible to contact anybody in the government. They've built walls around themselves. You want to get somebody's last name, typo corrected. Good luck. You got to contact the senator to contact USCIS to get a new green card produced. So the frustration is, to me, not in its design, but its implementation. And so you have all these people talking about get in line, come in legally. It is what it is. It's the wrong conversations to be having. I think what most people want is a system that just functions. Efficient system. Give me a chance to hear my case without, a 2, 3, 4-year backlog. So that's one thing. The other thing I would say about the immigration system is I think it's very unforgiving. It is holding immigrants to a much higher standard than anybody else in all of society. So if you signed an I-9 form accidentally because your boss told you to sign it, and you accidentally wrote you're an American citizen, you're deportable. You just committed fraud. So I knew somebody whose supervisor at her job told her, fill this out. She did. And then good thing that she realized what was going on, but she was terrified that I'm now deportable and I made a mistake, but I'm not a criminal. I didn't commit fraud. And the consequences to this tiny error, it just seems like there's an injustice there. So I think that's one frustration I have with the system, that it holds immigrants to such a higher standard, where the tiniest mistake, you accidentally got registered to vote. So that's something. We had a gentleman who went to get his driver's license, didn't speak English well, had just come to the US. They asked him, do you wear contacts? He said, yes. They asked him, are you an organ donor? He didn't know what an organ donor is. He just said, yes. They asked him, are you registering to vote? He said, yes. He just wanted to get out of there. Well, you just committed fraud. You said you're going to vote as an American citizen. You're not an American citizen. And when these things happen, it is so painful for somebody who doesn't think of themselves as a criminal to all of a sudden have to deal with this new identity.
Do you feel that that's only limited to immigrants, or is it law in general?
I think there's a lot of immigrant personality there, because I think that, we're generalizing, but the American personality is, no way, I've got rights here. You know what I mean? It's just so different. It was, nope, not a problem. Take me to court.
That's true.
I think culturally there's big differences, and Americans are a lot more assertive. These are my rights, than people who are just coming.
Do you see a change in the current government regarding how the processes have been delayed or the progress has been slowed down? Do you see any changes in the past few years in terms of the immigration process?
They definitely want to slow down immigration, and they've been successful at it, not just for Iranians. At the border, asylum seekers, with the H-1B program, there's been a significant number of RFEs issued. They don't like the H-1B program. They think it takes jobs away from Americans. OPT, which is working on a student visa after you've graduated, they don't like it. the current administration's view of immigrants is that they're taking away from the American workforce. They're taking jobs away. So things have slowed down. EAD cards, work authorization, used to be issued in 3 months. Now it's 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. There's a new form that they came out with, I-944, Declaration of Self-Sufficiency. They want to make sure that anybody coming here is not going to come and immediately go on public assistance and need any kind of government help. So they want to see your credit score. Do you have loan history, credit debt, bank accounts, assets? That's another thing that they've done, which slows down the process. Processing of cases have taken longer. Their goal was to limit immigration, and I think they've been successful at it, to the country's detriment, where there are so many employers saying we have a 3% unemployment rate. This was 2-3 months ago. I can't get the help I need. I can't get enough workers. We've got a 2%, 3% unemployment rate. If we wanted to have work done on our backyard, any landscaper we called, they said it'll be 2 years, 3 years.
I understand we're in a different environment right now, and there's a fierce competition for jobs in the States. But I just want to remind you that over 50% of our biotech and pharmaceutical researchers and thought leaders currently working on COVID-19 testing and vaccine development are immigrants. Over 25% of our healthcare workers risking their lives for you and I are immigrants. Eric Yuan, founder of Zoom, who made virtual work possible, rescuing countless businesses, creating many jobs here in the States and across the globe, is an immigrant. If you haven't listened to my 10th episode where I interviewed Cleanthus, a biotech executive, make sure you do. Also, listen to our very first episode where Dr. D shared his passion for creating miracle babies. This is what Shabnam inferred to. Delay or absence of these individuals can make or break our society. We're together in this. We're all immigrants on this planet. Let's embrace our differences and collaborate.
But in general, what are some suggestions that you have for people who are going through their immigration process right now? What can they do to make sure they're not going out of status, make sure that they are not being impacted?
So if the individual is inside the United States, probably if you're a citizen, you don't have anything to worry about. If you're a green card holder, you have nothing to worry about. If you are on a non-immigrant visa, like a student visa, an H-1B, a J visa, you need to make sure that you extend your status or you change your status to even a tourist visa if you have to, if you cannot leave the United States before the expiration of your status. Mm-hmm. If you're in the US on a non-immigrant visa and your student visa is expiring, if you can't extend it, you should apply to change that to a visitor visa, which would allow you to stay here for an additional 6 months. And I think the USCIS is fully understanding of that scenario. They are going to be a little bit more lenient and extend statuses, but you have to apply for it.
What suggestions do you have for our audience who are currently waiting for a letter, waiting for their process? Because as we know, some of those immigration cases have been delayed or not being processed currently. What suggestions do you have for these people who are struggling right now?
So 2 things. One, if it's a type of delay that you can do something about it, then you should. If your case is outside of normal processing times, you should contact USCIS and ask them to expedite. If your case is in admin processing and it's at an embassy abroad, we say every 6 weeks, write the embassy an email, ask them for a follow-up, even though the response back from them is probably going to be meaningless. You want to make sure that you have a paper trail of evidence to show that I have contacted the embassy 6 times over the last year, just in case you ever wanted to file a lawsuit in the future. So there are these things that you should always do to keep your case going, but at the same time, live your life. Hersnachor, don't let the system ruin your marriage. Go see your husband, go see your wife, go see your kids in a third country. Life is not just about money. You want to enjoy each other, call every day. Sitting there, whining, hating my life, counting the days, getting mad, you're only ruining today. You're just ruining your everyday. Nothing's going to change by just worrying about the future. You're just ruining what you could have been having fun, enjoying today.
What are some common misperceptions that people have about what an immigrant lawyer can do?
I mean, I think that there are some people who think that if they just get an attorney, everything's going to be fine. And that's not necessarily the case. There's a travel ban. This is the law. There's a travel ban. We don't want Iranians here. That's what it's saying. But the immigrant says, find a way to make that not apply to me. Or my case is an admin processing. It's been there 2 years. Do something. There are parts of the law that are outside our control. It's the administration. I can't just get the visa issued so quickly. We generally tell people on the phone, don't hire us for this. I can't do anything for you. If you want to, you can, but I'm strongly advising you not to. Or if anybody had the perception that a lawyer can do things through just being persuasive, because maybe that might be the case in other countries where if I just pay you extra, you can find a way to get this done. And that's just not the case.
That's very insightful. Open mic opportunity.
Don't have a victim's mindset, because I think that's what losers do. You want to be a winner, you go out and you get what you're worth. You stop pointing fingers and saying that you're not where you're supposed to be because of him, her, or anybody. And that's a quote that I got out of the Rocky 6 movie. That's what cowards do. That's not what winners do. You want to get what you're worth. You got to fight for it. You got to be willing to take hits and keep getting up, because life will beat you. It beats you to your knees. Every day is going to be a challenge, and you got to keep getting up. That is a quote that certainly has impacted my life. Maybe stop trying to predict and control the future, because I think a lot of people, I can't tell you how many times people ask questions like, if I were to apply for an NIW and if I were to apply for a green card in 5 years, and if this law were to pass in 2 years, how is it going to impact me? There are so many hypotheticals in that. But what that conversation tells me is that you're trying to control your life. And sometimes the best thing you could do is to not, to go with the flow, figure out what you're going to do today. What's my next step in life? Do it, and then see where that step takes you. The only other thing I would add to that is a quote from Einstein that has always stayed with me, and that is, perfection of means and a confusion of goals seems, in my opinion, to characterize our age. So everybody is obsessed with sticking with doing things a certain way, but not knowing where they're trying to get to. If you know what you're trying to accomplish, there's multiple ways to get there, and you should be flexible in how you're going to get there. You want to be successful in the US and you think it's going to be because you're going to be an engineer, it might not be the path for you, but it doesn't mean that's the only path to success. There's 100 other paths to success, and one that's probably way better for you. So don't be stuck and rigid in following certain way because you decided that's going to be the way for me. Every time a door has closed in my life, I have found the silver lining, and I have been so grateful for it years later. Thank goodness that terrible thing that I really, really, really wanted at the time did not happen. So
that's true. And that was the story that we talked about earlier about my life as well. A lot of times it is hard at that point, but like you mentioned, if you are someone that don't have that victim mindset, you will figure a way, you will find that opportunity, and you will succeed. Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate this opportunity. And I know that you have a very open and active Facebook page that our audience can connect with you there. But are there any other way that they can connect with you and ask their questions?
They can always email us at the firm, Facebook Messenger. The group is fine. Any way works.
And I'm going to make sure that I will have those in the show notes to make it easier for people to contact you. Again, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for having me.
In this episode, we talked about Shabnam's journey and her view of our immigration system, its benefits and its limits, and what we can do as an immigrant to better adapt. Who do you know that is going through this journey feeling down and depressed? Share this episode with them and let them know that you're thinking of them. Maybe one of Shabnam's insights or our many stories in Empowering Conversations podcast give them the hope and the guidance they desperately need right now. Also, here I'd like to thank those of you who took the time to write us a review, to tell us how we can improve. You, my audience, mean the world to me, and I know I will see you and your friends in the next episode of Empowering Conversations, where all of us can learn from successful immigrants, one conversation at a time.